Good evening. I'm Uday Bhaskar. Welcome to Wide Angle. This is a new program that seeks to provide an informed and objective view of contemporary developments that have a bearing on national security, international affairs, and related subjects. Today, we will look at the recent developments in the Navy. The first is the accident on the Kilo class submarine INS Sindhuratna, which resulted in the tragic loss of the lives of 2 young naval officers, and a few of the sailors were also injured. The other is the unprecedented resignation of Admiral D K Joshi, now the former naval chief. What ails the Navy is a question uppermost in the minds of most Indians, who are both concerned and confused about a sequence of events that go back to August of last year. The other aspect is that of the modernization of the Indian military and civil military relations. One often hears the word dissonance in relation to India's higher defense management. To discuss this subject today, I am joined by 2 very eminent guests. We have Mr. Amitabh Pandey, who retired as a secretary in the Ministry of Home Affairs, but he had a long stint in the Ministry of Defense in the early 90s. And the other is Vice Admiral Anup Singh, formerly Flag Officer Commanding-in-Chief of the Eastern Naval Command in Visakhapatnam. Anup, if I could start with you, if you could place the accident on the INS Sindhuratna in context, and also the fact that we had the enormity of the INS Sindhurakshak, which took place in August of last year. Where are we in terms of our submarine capability now, and what are the long-term plans?
The question is very topical for the Navy and the nation, particularly after Sindhuratna's accident. I think Sindhurakshak, everyone should agree, is a subject where the jury is still out, hopefully with some clues from forensic evidence may lead us to some kind of an answer, but I have my doubts. But insofar as Sindhuratna is concerned, one fact has to be understood by everybody who has not been anywhere near the Navy, that the most complex machine anywhere in the world, including space stations, is a submarine that resides underwater, because it has 2 very, very serious constraints not seen anywhere else, neither in an aircraft nor on a land platform. These are constraints of space and a more serious constraint of all kinds of technologies being moduled together to operate, and the constraint is also compounded further by some people amongst the crew being multitasked. With this is not the first time a submarine accident of this kind has taken place anywhere in the world. In fact, some of the most serious accidents took place in much more expensive submarine platforms, both in the Western navies and in the erstwhile Soviet Navy. And those accidents had nothing to do with nuclear reactors, which could have been catastrophic, except for 1 or 2 platforms. The reason is that even in brand new platforms like the USS Thresher in 1961 and 62 and the USS Scorpion, both were just about 2 or 4 years old. The accidents, the kind of accidents that took place, had something to do with water leakage in pipes in the engine room, and one of the submarines just sank down to about 3 kilometers of depth.
But Anup, if I could just ask you to pause here briefly, the central question that is animating everyone: was the INS Sindhuratna unsafe? There seems to be a perception that the batteries were not up to speed. Now, my own experience is that no submarine puts out to sea if there is the slightest doubt on the batteries. You want to sort of pick that up?
Yes. I doubt, even though the Board of Inquiry in the Navy will bring out what exactly happened, but I doubt if there was any serious mishap on any of the batteries, because that can be explosive. Batteries in a submarine emit hydrogen in the normal course of their cycle. And there are hydrogen eliminators on all kinds of submarines, conventional as well as nuclear powered. Now, there was, in all probability, some kind of a short circuit or a fire, perhaps in the battery compartment, above which is the accommodation complex. And that is how, since it happened during dark hours when people were perhaps asleep, the crew members, those crew members who were not on duty watch, they suffocated.
But yet I suppose we should also recognize the professionalism
Yes.
with which the crew responded to the emergency, because they were able to deal with a dived boat, a dived submarine with an emergency, evacuate the sailors who fell unconscious in the compartment, arrange for the helo lift, and in the process, I think the fact that these two officers were trapped and lost their lives, to me is also a reflection of the commitment and the quality of leadership. But Mr. Pandey, if I could come to you, because the other observation that has been made repeatedly is that the platforms were old. The INS Sindhuratna specifically was commissioned in 1988, which makes it almost 26 years old. And the operational life for a submarine, as we all know, is about 12 to 15 years. Much depends on the refit and the exploitation. But the whole pattern of delays, since you have worked in the MOD, and this has been addressed many times over the last 10 years with the UPA, how would you characterize? The submarine is only one platform that got delayed, but the general pattern of modernization not keeping up or induction of new platforms. What is your sort of perspective now that you've had some time to reflect on these matters?
Yeah. No, I think it's a wonder that any kind of procurement takes place
At all.
in the Ministry of Defence, because the processes and the procedures are so convoluted, so difficult, that to get through to the stage where you can actually succeed in making a procurement takes enormous amount of time. And this is at every level. This is both at the level of the services. Their own processes are very, very tedious and cumbersome, apart from being technically suspect. And certainly in the case of when it comes to the ministry, the procedures are even more convoluted. And the ministry is, three separate empires.
Departments, yeah.
It is not one thing. These are different kingdoms. And each kingdom has its own very convoluted set of internal procedures. So overall, the architecture is such that one, it ensures that rent seeking and corruption gets deeply embedded into the architecture itself, because you have to pay through the nose for just keeping the ball in play. So simply to get from one stage to another, you have to start paying. Otherwise, things just don't move. So, and this fetishistic obsession with the personal reputation of integrity, especially in recently what one has heard, means that procedures get even more complicated. So the knee-jerk reaction to any kind of scandal or any whiff of controversy is to start centralizing more and to make the procedures even more difficult than before, because you can't trust anyone. In the process, delays are bound to occur. In fact, the fact that some procurements have taken place is to me a great wonder.
But let me come back to you, Anup, specific to the submarines. Now, the Indian Navy had a long-term perspective plan. Now, I recall that sometime in the mid-90s, we had spoken about a 30-year plan, because this was after we had inducted the first Foxtrot boats, which we got from the former Soviet Union. Those in turn were followed by the Kilo class, the Sindhu Ghosh, and in between we had the induction of the 4 West German boats, the HDW. So in the mid-90s, since you also worked in plans, if you could just give us a better idea about the perspective plan of the Navy itself, and where are we 20 years from the mid-90s to now?
You see, we were in a very happy state of affairs in the 80s, when concurrently 2 procurements for 2 types of submarines, one from the west and one from the east, came through, to the pleasant surprise of the entire Navy and its planners. And these, of course, there was a lot of hard work and advanced work which was done. One with the Germans in the HDW case, as you know. 2 submarines came in from Germany. The balance 2 were made in India with the intent, and because of our pushing, that we must get technology, transfer of technology and the build technology within India. And that's where you're making the Scorpions now, thanks to that art of submarine building that we have imbibed. The other series that came was from the Soviet Union, the Kilos, starting in 1986. Now, we knew that a submarine's life, even in temperate climates, is no more than 2 to 2.5 decades. And we live in tropical waters, which are the worst in the world insofar as temperature, salinity and humidity are concerned. These are killers for steel hulls. And despite good operational cycles, there are problems of A, obsolescence of certain parts where modifications have to be done from the original supplier. B, of the budgeting system for bulk procurements even out of the revenue budget. It is not easy. And the most important thing is that once these submarines were becoming about passing through their midlife crisis, which happened towards the mid-90s, the Navy put together a 30-year submarine plan asking for 24 platforms to be inducted over a period of about 15 years. That hasn't happened. The start point is with the Scorpion. So we are a decade and a half behind schedule.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the empirical reality is that despite having the 30-year plan in the mid-90s,
yes,
we inducted the last boat, if
yes,
I remember right, in 2000.
That's right.
Meaning that for 14 years,
yes,
we have not been able to acquire a new boat.
Yes.
And since you mentioned the HDW and the fact that we opened a submarine line in Mumbai, this is something that I'm sure the MOD would have also had a lot to ponder over. That, to the best of my mind, because again of the fact that we had quote unquote that scandal on the HDW boat, very swiftly, having invested almost $100 million at that time in opening a submarine building line, the government shut it down. And as a result, not only did we lose a decade plus in terms of the technological and the industrial skills, we are almost now going back to the starting point in submarine building, and I'm sure MOD would have thought about this. But we'll come back to it. We'll take a short break here and now try and see as to what is the way ahead in terms of the larger policy issues.